Dear students, today in this module we will be discussing about the factors influencing waste generation and the various environmental and health hazards which are associated with waste generation and disposal. In the previous modules, we have studied about waste and its types. We have also studied about the waste generation and the factors which are associated with it. Now, in this module, we will be discussing about the factors which contribute to the waste generation. Now, to begin with, let's have a small introduction about what is waste. Now, waste is nothing but any unwanted or unused material which is of no further use to an individual. They are generally thrown out without any processing. Now, these waste material creates a lot of chaos to the environment. They create a lot of hazards to the environment as well as the individual's health. So, you need to focus on these things. So, these waste needs a proper processing and treatment. Now, with this introduction, now let's look into the learning objectives of this module. The learning objectives of this module will be to analyze the various factors influencing the waste generation. Then we will discuss about how to understand, or we will understand about the various environmental effects that are caused by the waste generation and disposal. Then we will also gain an understanding about what are the different health hazards which is created as a result of waste generation and waste disposal. Now, as I told you earlier, waste is being generated from various different sources, be it a residential source or a commercial source, industrial source or institutional source. Now, these waste are generally collected and then disposed of into a certain place. This is how it is practiced in India. Now, there are certain factors which influence the waste generation. The waste generation is defined as the rate of change of quantity of solid waste. Now, the generation actually varies with respect to a certain time. Within a certain time, it keeps increasing and they are governed by a lot of factors. Now, what are they? One, it's a geographical location. Second is the customs and lifestyle. Third is the climate. Fourth will be the living conditions. Then comes your economic standard of an area. Now, the characteristic quantity, volume and composition of these waste may vary from country to country, from region to region and also from urban to rural area. Now, let's discuss each of these parameters one by one. Now, let's start with population. Now, population, you all know, with the increase in population, obviously your waste generation will increase. Also, same is the case for population density also. For example, in a metropolitan cities, if you see, the waste generation is high when compared to a rural area or a village where the waste generation will be comparatively lesser. So, population plays a major role. Next comes, like highly populated countries will have a high per capita waste generation. Now, higher the population density, again more will be the waste generation. Now, when you talk about the developed countries, why the waste generation is high in these developed countries is like they prefer all materials in a well packed boxes. So, that is how the waste generation is high, plus their lifestyle is also different when you compare to a village. Now, age is another factor which influences waste generation. Now, let's discuss about how an urban and a rural area play a role or influence in waste generation. Now, generally if you see, people migrate from rural areas to urban areas in search of employment, educational opportunities. And also the urbanization and industrialization is another important reason for their migration. Now, generally according to certain reports, if you see, they say around 1 lakh people migrate every day from the rural areas to the urban areas. And around 3.6% is the rate of migration, especially in India if you talk about. Now, this again contributes more generation in urban areas when compared to a rural area. Also, in urban area, the lifestyle is different. You use a lot of packed materials. You get even food in packing materials. You use a lot of paper, plastics and all those things. And these electronic waste is another one important type of waste which is generally found in the urban environment, and it is not present in rural areas or the village environment. So, that's the difference why urban area has more amount of waste generation. Also, generally if you see in rural areas, you can see just agricultural waste or farm waste or biodegradable waste. There you cannot find these packing material or electronic waste or biomedical waste and things like that. So next factor which contributes to waste generation is your economic status and your lifestyle. You all know we have like the low income group, middle income group and high income group. So accordingly the waste generation will also vary. Like for example, high income group obviously they'll buy materials which is well packed and all those things when compared to a low income group. So waste generation is very high among high income group and high income countries. Higher the income rate and the rate of urbanization, greater will be the solid waste generation. Now with the increase in the income, the consumption of goods also will be different, because high income or high society people, they keep buying more clothes, more papers, they go for more gadgets, furnitures, they keep buying new things. So as a result the old ones are just thrown off like that, which adds to the waste. Now this is not the case in a low income group or a middle income group, though in the high middle class society this is again increasing. The next factor which influences your waste generation is your geographical location. Now depending upon the geographical location also, your waste generation keeps varying. Like for example, if you find a place in a hilly area, there the waste generation will be comparatively lesser, because the amount of goods that is being taken till the hilly terrain is much lesser when you compare to a metropolitan city or a plain area. So also when your place or the place of waste generation is in the located in a place where you have an autumn season, then you tend to have more amount of yard waste. Likewise, if you take India as an example, in the northern part of India during the months of February and March, the yard waste generation is high. Now agricultural waste, again it is high during the harvest season, it will not be there in the sowing season. So like that, geographical location is mostly interlinked to collection frequency as well as waste generation. Collection frequency is nothing but how frequently you collect the waste. So wherever the waste generation is higher, you need to have more collection frequency. Now as I told you, a place which is located in a higher altitude which will have waste accumulation, but they have a reduced collection frequency, because for you to collect, go around the hilly terrain and collect it and come, so it is little difficult and it also adds to the cost. So generally the collection frequency gets minimized. When you talk about tourist places, there again the waste generation you can find more only during the tourist season, not throughout the year. So these are certain examples how geographical location influences your waste generation. Then comes your seasons. Now as you all know, one example I already told you, harvest season you will have a very high quantity of waste generation. So in autumn season or the fall season, you can find a lot of yard waste, you can find a lot of leaf litter, twigs and all those things. So yard waste generation will be high. Likewise in summer seasons, if you see, the waste generation, it's not directly linked, but you can see like during summer seasons your vegetables and fruits and all whatever you buy, they keep spoiled. They get spoiled much faster, because the rate of decomposition is faster, because your bacterial activity or microbial activity is high. So there you have to keep collecting your waste very frequently, and the waste generation also is little higher when compared to a winter season where your temperature is less and the decomposition rate is also delayed. So waste generation is high in summer season when compared to a winter season. High temperature, as I told you, they can lead to faster decomposition of the vegetables and the eatables. Now this might be again one of the reason for increased waste generation during the summer season. Now seasons, again if you connect it to a tourist place, seasons always favor tourism, and there you can have waste generation. The next factor which influences your waste generation is your public attitude. Attitude is very, very important, which is lacking in today's time. People are aware of the effects which is caused by the waste, but they don't take that responsibility to manage them. So the attitude of the public to change their habits and lifestyle might lead to reduced waste generation. For example, nowadays if you see, people keep buying a lot of clothes, they keep buying a lot of new gadgets as and when they come. So you can utilize or manage them properly. So buying clothes more than required, wasting food, frequent replacement of household items, mobile phones, electronic gadgets. These are some of the major reasons for waste generation. So, when public attitude keeps changing, this will automatically reduce the waste generation. Okay? Then comes your legislation. Now, India as a country, it lacks strict laws and legislation. So, when your laws are strict, obviously people will think about it. So, strict legislation might reduce the quantity of waste generation. Now, existence of local and state regulations at least for the use and disposal of certain specific items might reduce the waste generation. One example can be Indian rules control the generation of packing materials and plastics. This is one example. You all know recent times you might have come across many articles in newspapers which says like control plastic. This year the theme for Earth Day is also beat plastic pollution. So now many states they have banned plastics and some states are going to ban plastics from 2019. So this is again one way the government has played a significant role in controlling the packaging material. So likewise you have to have such rules for every type of waste which will reduce your total quantum of waste that is being generated. Now these are the different factors that influences the waste generation in every region and every country or urban and the rural region. Now let's discuss about the environmental effects which are caused by these waste that is being generated or waste that is being disposed of without any protection. The waste generation and the improper disposal, as I told you, it has resulted in a number of environmental effects. Now it has affected the water, air, land, soil, even noise pollution has been increasing due to the waste generation. Now let's discuss each one of them in detail. Now how water is getting affected by improper waste management. Waste management means like waste generation, disposal and all those things. Because in India what do? We keep dumping in an open area which does not have any protection. So let's discuss what are the effects that it causes on the water. The improper waste management, I mean the open dumping of waste, it has polluted the water and the groundwater. Now how does it happen? You know, waste material, the biodegradable waste material has some amount of moisture in them. Now this moisture, what does it do is like once the material starts degrading, it oozes out, it gets released out from the material. Now this watery liquid that leaches out from the waste material, it's called as your leachate. Now this leachate or the liquid material will ooze out depending upon the field capacity. How much the biodegradable material is able to hold the water. Now this watery liquid, what happens is slowly it will come out of the material or the waste material and it will slowly infiltrate and it will reach the soil. Now through soil as the medium, it will slowly percolate with time and it reaches the groundwater and it affects the groundwater quality. Now the water pollution level is again accelerated by the rate of precipitation. Precipitation is nothing but your rainfall, snow or hailstones and all those things. Now precipitation, what does it do is, it again adds to the water on the waste material. This will again accelerate the leachate and it will carry it much faster, because you all know the rainwater again infiltrates through the soil medium and then reaches the groundwater. That is one thing. Second, it also causes a surface runoff. Now what is surface runoff? You might have seen whenever it rains, the water keeps moving, okay? It keeps moving from one area to, it keeps flowing from one region to the other region. So that is called as a surface runoff. So precipitation, what does it do is like once it is raining, it will rain on the waste also. So all the waste material or the leachate which is there, it is being carried off along with the flow of rainwater. So that causes the surface runoff. And where does the rainwater actually end up? It ends up into any of the catchment bodies like the surface water bodies like rivers, streams, lakes and finally sea. So by this way it affects the surface water bodies also. It pollutes your river, it pollutes your stream, it pollutes your lakes and all other things. Now when the leachate is being taken off into these water bodies, along with that it is not just the water, it will carry a lot of pollutants with them. Now eutrophication, you might have heard it before also. Eutrophication is nothing but your algal blooms. Nowadays if you see you cannot see any water body without this green algal growth or Hyconia growth. This is called as the eutrophication. Why does it occur? This is due to the high amount of nutrient influx into the water body. Now what are the nutrient which causes this plant growth? It is the nitrate as well as the phosphate, which causes your eutrophication. The eutrophication again occurs due to the entry of leachate and other pollutants which is carried off by the rainwater. That is one thing. Also there is a loss in water quality. Your water quality is lost and it is no more suitable for you to drink, or it does not become, the palatability of the water gets lost. Okay? So that is another problem. This again will have a multiple consequences, because if you drink the same water, it is going to affect your health, and through food chain all these pollutants might enter into the higher levels of organisms. Now the entry of leachate, again it will alter your pH of groundwater. You know what is pH, right? So it will alter the pH of groundwater. Maybe it can be acidic, it can convert it into alkaline. So according to the characteristic of leachate which is going along with the precipitation, it will alter your pH. Then when such changes in pH occurs, then what will happen? It will favor more dissociation of minerals from the aquifers. Now aquifers are storage units, underground storage units where your groundwater are stored. Okay? So what will happen? More minerals gets dissociated and it will be there in the aquifers. When these aquifers are places from where you pump out water, groundwater. So now these aquifers, when they are rich in, when they are having a lot of minerals, and when you take up the groundwater, these minerals will again enter into your body and will cause a lot of health effects. Now again this leads to the loss in water quality. As I told you, when you consume the contaminated water, then again it leads to spread of lot of diseases and so on. Now you all know soil plays a great role in restricting the movements of iron into the groundwater. They are the natural filters. Any pollutant which is entering through the soil matrix, majority is removed, but still some amount enters into the groundwater. So clay, if you have a clay soil, then it restricts more amount of ions movement into the soil matrix. So now let's discuss about the soil pollution. Now how this waste or the waste material affects your soil. Now you know the waste is just dumped open in an open area without any protection. You don't provide any liners, you don't take care of the soil, you just dump it in an open area. In those cases what happens, these pollutant will bind to the soil and its minerals, and slowly it will increase the pollutant level in the soil with time. Now the accumulation of these metals in the soil will lead to again a lot of associated effects. Now when these metals, if they are there in the soil, it will restrict your bacteria, it will affect the microbial diversity, it affects the productivity, it affects the plant growth and so on. Now metals like cadmium, copper, nickel, lead and zinc, it will alter the metal chemistry. When the pH gets altered, again your soil pH gets varied, again indirectly it affects your vegetation and the microbial diversity. Also your mineral loss will be very high. Now the vegetation gets affected, as I told you, you know plants keep absorbing these heavy metals through the root system. The pollutant, it affects the natural metabolism of plants. Like sometimes you can see the injuries which are visible. Sometimes it is invisible and sometimes it is visible. Visible, like you can see yellowing of leaves and leaf withering and all those things. Okay. So places where you have these waste which is being dumped, if you tend to visit a dump site or an open area where your waste is being dumped, you can see very scarce vegetation will be there because it kills your vegetation, and vegetation normally does not survive in those areas. Okay. So the waste dumping again affects or destroys the entire ecosystem. Now how does your waste affect the air? Now the air is affected by the emission of methane, carbon dioxide, oxides of sulfur and nitrogen and other volatile organic compounds which is released during waste decomposition. Now these emissions generally alter the air quality in the local as well as in the regional level. depending upon the rate of emissions and other meteorological conditions. Now, burning of these waste also occurs in the areas where you dump the waste, and this also leads to the emission of particulate matter and other gaseous pollutants. Now, open burning will also result in the release of certain carcinogens, especially the dioxins and furans. Even the PCDFs, polychlorinated dibenzofurans, are also released, which are generally called as dioxins, are also released, and these are carcinogenic substances. These are generally released during the burning of plastics, because wherever waste is being dumped, if you set fire, plastics are also there, so plastics also get burnt and then they release dioxins and furans. More significance is there for these materials because they have a lot of carcinogenic and mutagenic properties. Now, again, another way of these emissions are from incinerators. Incinerators are nothing but the treatment units where you burn or combust the waste. They also cause air pollution because they release particulate matter and other gaseous pollutants. Hydrogen chloride, carbon monoxide, lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium and selenium are some of the pollutants that are released during burning. Now, the last one in this environmental effects is your noise pollution. How does waste generation contribute to noise pollution? It is carried in collection vehicles. So, noise pollution is generally generated during the transport of waste in vehicles. Now, these vehicles and machinery used in waste processing are the main source of noise. Now, what are the impacts that they create? Of course, it creates a public nuisance, it creates disturbance around for the residents who are living around the area. Now, these impacts can be reduced when you have a proper maintenance of the machinery and vehicles. Now, workers again can be saved from these occupational hazards by using earplugs and earmuffs. Now, what are the occupational hazards? Occupational means any hazard which occurs in a working environment, then you call it as an occupational hazard. Then to reduce the noise, you can also have green belts. Green belts are nothing but you plant a lot of trees around this area so that it minimizes the noise which is coming from that area. So, green belts generally act like a barrier to stop the noise pollution or minimize them. Okay. Now, how does the odor and aesthetic gets affected during the waste dumping? Now, uncontrolled dumping generally affects the aesthetic. Aesthetic means you don't like to see a dump site where the waste is being disposed of. So, obviously it creates a visual hindrance to the trespassers and individuals living in the nearby locality. Now, generally the beauty of the city or a town is lost when you do a open dumping of waste. Now, dumping or temporary storage of waste leads to odor problem due to decomposition of waste. Now, this odor problem again can be minimized by increasing the collection frequency from the storage regions. Wherever it is being stored, there if you do a collection frequency, if your collection frequency is high, then you will not have such problems. Now, containment of waste in these protected area or the controlled landfills can again minimize your odor problem. Now, in the last section, we discussed about the various factors which are influencing the waste generation, and we discussed about the population, economic status, lifestyle, public attitude, legislation. These many factors we discussed and how it is contributing to waste generation. Then we also discussed about the environmental effects, like what the waste generation and disposal is creating to the environment. Like we have discussed about how it is affecting the water and how it is polluting the soil, air, and how noise pollution is coming out and how you can manage them. Also we discussed like how the odor problem and aesthetics is getting affected by the waste generation and disposal. Now, in this section we will be discussing about the health effects which are associated with the waste generation and disposal. What are the different health effects? Now, waste disposal in open dumps or when you are storing it for a long period of time in the collection area or a processing site, or when you handle it in a improper way or you don't have a proper management method, it leads to a lot of health effects. Now, health effects, it is both for the human beings as well as the animals. Now, mainly if you see, occupational health hazards are one important thing. In the previous section also I told you occupational health hazard is nothing but when a person is getting affected or his or her health is getting affected in the work environment, then you call it as an occupational hazard. These occupational hazards are caused during accidents, waste transport and processing. Now, what are the effects that they cause? Now, waste dumps, which acts like a storehouse of these infective microorganisms and pathogens, they act like a suitable environment for their growth. They provide proper food for the growth. In short, if you say, it becomes a house where lot of microorganisms grow and multiply. Now, when the workers who collect this waste from this area, they get infected, because when you have a lot of microorganisms, you also have some pathogenic microorganisms which has a potential to cause diseases. So, when the person who is handling the waste, they will get affected with a lot of diseases. Also, what will happen when in this waste you will have a lot of flies, mosquito and then other stray animals keep visiting these areas for their food. Like your rats, you can see cats, dogs, cows, pigs and all those things. Now, these stray animals will act like a carrier and they will bring the infection to the residential area, and by this way your population which is living in the town and cities also get affected. Sometimes epidemics is also caused by the carrier, by these carriers, because they transport a lot of vectors to the human beings. You can name some example, like it can be typhoid, salmonellosis, gastroenteritis, dysentery, malaria, filaria and dengue are some of the popular diseases which are brought by the flies and mosquitoes. Now, the flies generally they lay their eggs in a warm moist environment which is given by your decomposing waste, and the organic content is used as a feed for the larva. Now, once they get mature, they migrate from the waste and to the soil, and before they transform into a pupa. The pupa, what does it do? They remain in the soil for some time, and then slowly they migrate to other areas. By this way, it keeps spreading, and slowly the adult fly again will keep going and it gets affected. Now, the life cycle completely occurs within the waste pile. So, proper cleaning of storage bins and frequent collection will generally avoid this. Also, when you have wherever you are storing the waste, if you have a proper covering over the waste, that will also minimize the rate of infection. Also, not only minimizing the infection, it will also avoid the breeding of flies in the waste material. So that's why, like for example, the waste the waste tires, broken vessels, tins, cans, when you throw it out, it leads to the accumulation of water in them, which again acts like a breeding ground for these mosquitoes. So, if you have a proper sanitary and cleanliness, then you can eliminate all these health problems which are associated with that. Now, the typhoid, cholera, amoebiasis are some of the infections which are caused by roaches. Now, poor management of solid waste again leads to this infection. Rats and other rodents cause the spread of diseases like plague, murine, typhus, leptospirosis, histoplasmosis, rat bite fever, dalmanellosis, trichinosis and many others. Now, waste dumps act as a source of food and shelter for these rodents. Now, pigs again, they are one of the major carriers for spreading a lot of diseases like trichinosis, cysticercosis and toxoplasmosis. They are generally transmitted through infected pork. People who eat pork, they tend to get these diseases. Either when you eat pork in a raw state or improperly cooked pork, that will affect them. Now, other occupational hazards, apart from the infection, if you see, other popular hazards can occur while operating machineries or handling waste. Now, accidents might occur and can be considered as one of the occupational hazards. Like for example, waste is a commingled waste. Commingled waste means everything is in a mixture, it is not segregated. You will have a lot of blade, erasers, then you can have glass, broken glass and all those things. So, when a person who is collecting the waste, they tend to get cut. So, sharps, syringes, broken glass, blades in the waste causes cut to the workers who are involved in collecting and transporting the waste. Now, storage containers, again if they have sharp edges, again they can cause injury to the person who are handling the waste. Once there is a cut, again infection, it is easy for the disease causing organisms to enter and cause infection in them. So that again you have to take care. Dust from the waste material also affects your eyes on exposure. Now diseases can also be spread through animal bites. If there is burning which is being done for the waste, then inhaling those gases can lead to a lot of chronic respiratory diseases and sometimes cancer also. So accidents again during loading and unloading of waste can also lead to your fracture in bones, ligament tear, muscle tear and all those things. So this is again considered as an occupational hazard. When in these open dumps, when you have a lot of smoke which comes out during burning of waste, that might reduce your visibility. That is again one reason for causing accidents among the during the transportation or during vehicle movement. So that is again one important health hazard of waste generation and disposal. Sometimes you also have tend to get chemical burns. People who are handling the waste, if there is any hazardous chemical in the waste material, they tend to have a chemical burns. Now hazardous material means like pesticide, cleaning solutions, solvents which are generally used in everyday activities in household and other commercial establishment can cause these chemical burns. Now methane explosion is also one important risk which is associated with waste generation and dumping. Now generally in a landfill is nothing but a control site where you start containing your waste. During the decomposition it generates methane and carbon dioxide. Now methane explosion again creates a major threat of accidents. Now that also is one of the health hazard, you can consider as one of the health hazard. Now careless dumping of waste like lead, acid, nickel, cadmium and mercuric oxide batteries also affect children and adults. To summarize, at the end of this module, we have discussed about the different factors that influence the waste generation, like your population, economic status, lifestyle, public attitude, legislation, climate and so on. We discussed how each of these factors is influencing the waste generation. Then we started discussing about the environmental effects that are generally caused by waste disposal and improper management, like how does it affect your water, how does it affect your air, soil and how it creates the noise pollution, and also what are the means by which this noise pollution can be minimized. Then we started discussing about the health hazards which are associated with the waste disposal and improper management. There we discussed about how the waste is acting like a breeding ground and how these diseases are getting spread through the residential area, and we also discussed about the various occupational hazards which are created by these waste material. Then we also discussed about like the ligament tear, fracture which occurs for the workers when they handle the waste. I hope this module would be of help to you. Thank you.